This is chapter 20, and we're going to be talking about the circulatory system, specifically the blood vessels. And when you look at how long the chapter is, we're only going to be doing the first half of the chapter. The last 40 pages are system by system and the names of every major blood vessel in each of the systems. So if you're going into some branch of science where you need that, then by all means work on that, memorize the names of every single vessel. But the ones that I want you to know are the ones you're learning in lab and the main ones coming into and out of the heart, and then some of the coronary arteries. So don't panic at the amount of material when you see it. So we're starting out talking about when did we discover the route of blood through the blood vessels? And interestingly enough, the Chinese already knew about it way before Christ, a long, long time ago. But we didn't rediscover it until about roughly 400 years ago. So I think it's interesting that we're reinventing the wheel, we're rediscovering things. And there was a bunch of fighting and not believing that the heart is pumping blood, and a lot of people thought that the blood was being eaten by the organs and didn't realize it was coming back to the heart and going over to the lungs for oxygen. So it was kind of interesting. So if you like history, by all means, read about that. I have to admit I took a few liberties with some of the slides, but I didn't change anything. I just added a few things like learn the fun word anastomosis, because you're going to see it from time to time as we go through this chapter. So we're going to talk about the structure of the blood vessels, and we're going to see how arteries are different than veins and how those are different from capillaries. And we're going to talk about not just the heart, because we've already talked about the route through the heart, but now we're going to leave the heart and we're going to go through the body, and then we're going to come back to the heart. So we're going to talk about some of that. And there are some interesting variations that we will discuss. So this is a foreshadowing of things to come. All right. Arteries carry blood away from the heart. Arteries away, arteries away. Veins carry it back to the heart. And once you get out into the body, the business end of your whole blood vessel system are the capillaries. And they are the ones where you're going to absorb things, you're going to secrete things, you're going to filter things. So they're the working part. The rest is just carrying that with very little absorption because of them. Now, interestingly enough, if you took all the blood in the body, only about 5% is down in the capillaries. So the rest is just coming to and fro. But that 5% is very, very busy providing nourishment, hormones, picking up waste, and things of that nature. Here is a picture, and I've pointed this out in lab, and I'm pointing it out again in this class. Be sure that you don't say, oh, this is big, this must be the artery, and this is small, so this must be the vein, because you're wrong in that case. The vein is going to have a thinner wall. It's not going to have that really thick muscular wall. Arteries have to have a lot of pressure because they're the ones that are connected with the heart, where the blood is leaving the heart, and that pounding, where you're hitting it and it's coming out of the heart. If you don't have a strong, elastic vessel, artery, to pick up the force and actually kind of soften the force. So you have the elastic recoil, so some of the force is actually absorbed by the elastic fibers that make up the the artery. So don't let size fool you. Look at the thickness of the muscular layer and say, aha, that one's got to be an artery. And then you have the 3 layers of the artery. So this is nicely labeled. They call layers tunics. So sometimes you wear a tunic if you're, who wears tunics? So here's a medieval tunic with the guy with his rapier ready to go into battle. So tunic is a sheath, a covering. So your tunica externa is the external sheath. It is the outer layer, and it's usually connective tissue that is connected to other organs, to other vessels, and it kind of anchors it in place. The tunica media is the one that's the muscle layer, so media muscle, middle muscle. And then in the very inside, there is a layer of skin, and it is known as the tunica interna, or what most people call it, the intima. So it's the intimate layer. It is the one that touches the blood, and blood is intimately contacted with it. And here's kind of a neat where they're showing the branchings. So you may start out as an artery, and you may branch off and become capillaries, and then the capillaries come back together and become veins and go off and do things. So this is kind of neat. These are capillary beds surrounding your thyroid follicles. So you guys probably know you make thyroid hormone, but you probably didn't think about how does the thyroid hormone get throughout the body. Well, as you're busy making it and secreting it outside of the cells, then you've got these capillaries, and because they're only one cell layer thick, they just absorb the hormone, it gets into the capillaries, comes back over, and then eventually ends up in the heart and being spread throughout the body. So anyway, I thought this was kind of a neat picture showing you the branchings. I want to spend a second talking about the tunica interna, or the tunica intima, as most people call it. It is squamous epithelial cells. So it's flat little cells. It is selectively permeable, so some things can pass through, but most things cannot. It has chemicals that cause the whole vessel to get bigger or smaller, so dilation or constriction. And the biggest thing, it's very important to have a smooth, unbroken squamous epithelium endothelial layer, or tunica intima, because if those cells for any reason are knocked away, then underlying that there is collagen fibers, and blood that was normally just going along, will suddenly see the collagen fibers, the platelets are attracted to collagen, and it'll start a blood clot. So it's very important to have that tunica intima, or the internal tunic, that will repel blood cells and platelets so you don't have clotting. So that's kind of an important thing. If you have an inflammation around a blood vessel, then the endothelial cells will also produce cell adhesion molecules. So you can hold the cells together, you can heal the area, because if you have damage, you're going to have to replace it. So you can either replace it with scar tissue, or you can have some more of the squamous epithelial cells divide and fill in the area that was damaged. In lab, you were supposed to learn about blood pressure, and you know that the blood pressure, the force of the blood leaving the heart and hitting the arteries, is somewhere around 120, 130 millimeters of mercury pressure. That's the way we measure. Somebody just started out measuring it and how much pressure it takes to move mercury, and we still use those units even though we don't use mercury anymore. We have digital blood pressure cuffs and things like that, but we still talk about the pressure in terms of millimeters of mercury that would be moved. So most of you have heard, oh, my blood pressure is like 125/75. Well, that 125 is the upper range of the pressure that's hitting the arteries as it leaves the heart. So you really need this middle layer, the smooth muscle, the collagen for strength, and the elastic tissue to allow it to stretch a little bit. So it prevents the pressure of the blood as it goes through from literally ripping the vessel. Now, if you have really high blood pressure, a lot of people, they say, man, his blood pressure was so high, he stroked out. What happened is the pressure of the blood was more than the elastic tissue was able to stretch. And just like a rubber band, if you stretch it too far, it'll pop. And so you actually have the person's blood vessel popping, and then they bleed internally. So it's very good that we have this thick middle layer or tunica. Hopefully you guys remember from the last chapter that the heart, although it's full of blood, can't nourish its outer layers. So it has the whole coronary arteries and veins and blood system that nourishes the muscle of the heart. Well, if you've got a large artery, you have the same situation. You have blood inside that's passing through, but it can't penetrate all the way through the middle layer and all the way to the outer layer. So out in the outer layer, the tunica externa, which is also known as the tunica adventitia, you're going to have blood vessels supplying the outside of the artery. And it has its own little name. It's called the vasa vasorum. So the vasa vasorum are the blood vessels that nourish arteries. And they're actually part of the outer layer of the vessel in the outer tunica. So vasa vasorum, it nourishes the outer and the middle parts of arteries. And other things you have in the tunica adventitia are I told you have loose connective tissue that holds blood vessels together, has nerves, other organs, all held together in this outer meshwork. But remember the word vasa vasorum and why it's important for arteries to have them. This figure looks awfully busy, but basically it's comparing and contrasting the arteries and the veins. So over here, are the arteries. Well, my computer's acting up. Are the arteries over here, and they always color arteries red. And over here are the veins, so they always color them blue. And you're going to have the 3 layers, 1, 2, 3 layers, so they kind of do a nice job of that, showing you that. But they're showing you a few other things that are kind of important. So anytime you have squamous epithelial cells, you have this endothelium, which is the tunica interna or the tunica intima. Underneath, you're going to have what we call a basement membrane. So it's a little bit of connective tissue, and you've got some mast cells that have histamine in there. And hopefully you guys know what histamine is, because you periodically will probably take an antihistamine. So a histamine causes fluid to rush into an area. So when your nose starts running, that's histamine. You've gotten into some pollen, or you've gotten a cold or something. Something's irritating your nasal passages, and it's causing you to release histamine, which causes fluid to run into the area. It'll swell up. Think of a bee sting. Even if you're not allergic to a bee sting, wherever it stung you, that area is going to swell up. So you have aggravated the mast cells, and you've released histamine into the area. So it's important to know about the basement membrane, but what's also important that I just mentioned before about the basement membrane, it has collagen fibers. So it helps hold the capillary together. It helps hold the tunica intima together, but because it has collagen, If it's exposed, if you get down to the basement membrane for any reason, then your blood's going to start clotting in that area. So just keep that in mind. Now you notice that they have 3 layers for all this stuff, but when you get down to the capillary layer, it's one layer. It literally is just one layer. It's the squamous epithelial cells and then a little bit of this basement membrane to kind of hold the whole thing together. But the membrane is not cells. It's just some tissue that's kind of keeping the cells together. Now, as you're going through the arteries, we talked about you've got to have this thick elastic layer because you've got the pounding of the heart. But by the time you've made it through the arteries and you've come on down and you've gotten down into the arterioles, which are little bitty smaller arteries, and then you finally branch off into capillaries, you don't have this blood pressure. It has dissipated. So now you don't have to worry about rupturing this, because if you hit these capillaries with a lot of blood pressure, they just rip. I mean, since they're one cell layer thick, that would be devastating to them. All right. So although this looks busy, they're just pointing out that there's 3 tunics for both of these. There's only one layer for the capillaries, and they talk about the vasa vasorum. So you don't just have it in arteries. If you have a really thick vein, like think about the superior and inferior vena cava that come and dump into the right atrium, that you're going to have to nourish that. So vasa vasorum is going to be in any large vessel. All right. They expand during systole and recoil during diastole. So when we talk about your blood pressure and you say, well, my blood pressure is 125/75, this is systole, 125, and diastole is when you relax, and that's the lower number, and that's around 75. Now again, that changes for men, for women, for little kids, for old people. So there is no one normal blood pressure. I wanted to show you this picture because I find this absolutely fascinating. So this is where they put a camera inside of a blood vessel, and you can see these are the cells, the squamous epithelium, and it's kind of like a fried egg. So the cell itself is flat, and then the nucleus pokes up a little bit. So you can actually see the nucleus. So can you just kind of see a fried egg there and a fried egg here? And here's one that's kind of coming out at you. Something, maybe them putting the camera in there, has caused this to actually lift up a little bit. So this little fried egg, this little piece of squamous epithelium is actually sticking up a little bit. So here is the blood vessel right there. This is the tunica intima. So it's the interna or internal layer. And if there is damage, and I know that there's damage in this blood vessel up here somewhere off screen where we can't see it, because these are white blood cells and they are crawling along, going to the area where there is damage. So when these squamous epithelial cells, when the internal layer is damaged, it sends out a signal, a chemical signal into the bloodstream and says there's damage here. Send white blood cells. Send help. So you can't see it, but there's also fluid in here, and it's got all kinds of chemicals that cause the cells to heal, to clot, and then heal. So, but anyway, so this, where you have white blood cells crawling along the surface of the blood vessel, is called diapedesis. Diapedesis. Ped means foot, so they're walking or crawling along. So we just caught a snapshot, but if we had a camera that could could watch. They would just keep crawling along, kind of like something out of a sci-fi book. So your book breaks down arteries into 3 groups. It has the larger conducting arteries, and of course the aorta would be a classic example of that. So its job isn't really to do anything but just get the blood away from the heart and send it where it needs to go. So it is considered to be a conducting or a muscular large artery. And then you branch off into smaller arteries, and we call these distributing. So they're going to branch off, and they're going to go off to different organs. They go to your face, your legs, your spleen, your kidneys, all that stuff. And then you finally get smaller, and you get down into the resistance arteries, the smaller arteries. Now you have not nearly that blood pressure you started out with. You maybe started out with 125, and now you're down to maybe 10. So you're way down. The pressure is way, way down. And once you get to small enough arteries, we call them arterioles. And their job is to slow the blood down because you don't want to blow out your capillaries. So I jumped ahead. I was on slide 12, and I've jumped ahead to slide 26 because they were talking about medarterioles. And it doesn't make any sense to talk about a medarteriole until you actually see one. So let's say that you've got an artery, and it is carrying blood to an area, and you're going to branch off, and you're going to go out into a capillary bed. And the capillary bed is where all the action's going to happen. You're going to be picking up waste, you're going to be dropping off hormones and food and gases and just all the stuff that you carry around in your blood. And then it comes back, and it's picked up, and it's carried through a venule, which is a little tiny vein. So if something happens and you need blood quickly, it's like, okay, to heck with this. I don't need the blood to go into the capillary system and nourish this. I just need that blood to go to the brain, or I need that blood to go quickly to the legs so that I can run, or I need the blood to go quickly because I was shot and I'm bleeding to death. So you have these cute little muscle cells. It's one smooth muscle cell, and they're wrapped right here. So you see one here, one here, one here. And if I need to bypass this, I just need the blood to go from here to here and get it back quickly and bypass this whole capillary bed, you have a medarteriole. And it's just a quick, so you're coming this way, you were going to go in the capillary bed, but I need to reroute it. So I'm going to shut off the capillary bed with these one muscle cell, precapillary sphincters, they're called. And there you go. So it's just going to rush over there. So here you have a normal branching off, and everybody, these are open. Here you've got them closed, and no blood goes here. And you just do the bypass, get over there, and get back to the heart as fast as you can. So medarterioles are a linking vessel if you need to bypass a capillary bed. So they run through the middle of a capillary bed, but they're a bypass so that you don't have to waste blood and waste time with this particular capillary bed. So we're back to slide 12, and that's where they're talking about the medarteriole. It's a thoroughfare, and it provides a shortcut so you can bypass a capillary bed. All right, if you have a place in a vessel, it really doesn't matter about capillaries, but it really matters in some of your large veins and some of your large arteries. If you have a bulge, if you have a place where it is thinned out. Sometimes in your tires you see this. If you ever see your tires blebbing out, then you know it's about to pop. So that's not a good thing. So if the doctors are looking at your blood vessels, they can actually see where you're bulging at this particular area. And if you're bulging, it's just a matter of time before it ruptures. Maybe you get upset, you start screaming and jumping up and down or whatever, and you're just so angry and your blood pressure shoots up and there's just too much pressure, and as it goes past that thin point, it literally pops. So I actually lost an uncle. He was stuck in a traffic jam and he got so mad. And when they came to him, he said, I'm a doctor. I knew better. I knew I shouldn't have got upset over something as trivial as this, and now I'm dying. And he did, and he died. So he knew what he had done. He knew that he had blown a blood vessel from being so angry. So anyway, smokers are prone to having aneurysms. When my father found out he had lung cancer from smoking, they did all kinds of scans to see where the cancer had spread, and they found an aneurysm. And they said, well, the good news is you'll probably die of this cancer before the aneurysm blows. But as it turned out, they were wrong. The aneurysm blew, and that's what finally got him. So he didn't have to go through the last stages of his lung cancer from smoking. So this slide gives you some of the places where you commonly have aneurysms. It would be nice if an aneurysm hurt, so you would know to go to the doctor and get it repaired, because they can go in and they can strengthen the wall where it's bulging there, they can sew it up. But because unless it's putting pressure on some other structure, you usually don't hurt. So like I said, it would be nice if it did. And if it ruptures, then the blood runs out. So the word hemorrhage is meaning the blood is leaving the blood vessel and you are bleeding to death. To hemorrhage means to bleed too much. Some people are born with incompetent blood vessels, so they already have bulging or thin places on their blood vessels. Trauma can cause you to have a weakened area in your blood vessels. Bacterial infections. So sometimes people get a bacterial infection in their bloodstream, and being septic is no joke. It can frequently be fatal. But the most common cause is either high blood pressure, just the force of the blood coming out of your heart, or having the vessel occluded or clogged up with wads of fat. So atherosclerosis and hypertension are the main causes. They can inject dye and they can follow along and they can see if you have places that are blocked. They can see the blood vessels going to your various organs. And we talked about coming out of the heart, you have the aortic arch. So it ascends, it goes across the arch, and then it descends. And as it comes down, 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 once it gets into the abdominal region, we call it the abdominal aorta. And this is showing, look at the size here, and look at the size here. It's clear that that is way too big right there. That should not be that wide in through there. And here's another one. See where that branches off? It should be about that same diameter, but it's bulging here. So they would have to go in and very carefully reinforce this area so that it doesn't pop. So this is somebody who has 2 aneurysms. And I'm not exactly sure because I don't have the thing, but this may have already popped and be bleeding out right there because they've made this area red. So I don't know for sure, but in the major blood vessels, you have sensory structures that are able to actually detect what the blood pressure is, and it sends the message through the nerves and back up to the brain. And it also looks at the chemistry. So is there too much oxygen? Is there too much carbon dioxide? So it actually looks at the chemistry of the blood also, so that it sends messages, if it needs to the kidneys, so that you can fix the problem. So you send information to your brain stem, to regulate how fast your heart is beating, how wide you want the blood vessels. So you can remember, because you have a muscle, you can constrict it or you can relax it. So you can make the diameter whatever you need it to be to get the right kind of pressure. So you're constantly sending information to the brain, and it's constantly sending out signals telling you whether you should open or close various blood vessels. So this is kind of cool. And it also regulates your respiration too. So that would be the chemistry thing. It's like, whoa, we're not getting enough oxygen here, so we need to do something with the respiration as well as what the heart is doing. Because remember, the heart's sending it over to the lungs. So you can't talk about one without the other. Now, in the carotid sinuses, you have what we call baroreceptors. And you will especially see this happen if you're around old people. They'll start to stand up, and then they'll fall back into their chair. And they'll go, whoo, honey, I think I stood up too fast. If you stand up, gravity is going to pull the blood out of your head and pull it down into the rest of your body. And so these carotid sinuses, remember the carotid sinus, the carotid arteries are up above the aortic arch. They branch off up there. So, and then they come on down. Those baroreceptors are like, all of a sudden, whoa, wait a minute, there's not enough blood. And it sends a message. And so then the person, if they try to stand up the next time, hopefully the body has compensated and says, okay, this old person's going to stand up, so we need to constrict some of the blood vessels so it all doesn't run out of her head and her have to sit down suddenly or faint or fall down. So one of the things that old people are unfortunately prone to doing is falling down, and a lot of time it's because they're not getting enough blood to their head. So this is one of the nice things about baroreceptors. It like barometric pressure. It measures the pressure. So baroreceptor, barometric pressure. So hopefully you'll remember that one. So the chemoreceptors, the ones I told you about that are measuring your oxygen and your carbon dioxide, they call them, if they're in the carotid artery, they call them the carotid bodies. And they monitor the chemistry. They also send the information through the glossopharyngeal nerve to the brain stem. So when you do the nervous system, you should learn about the cranial nerves. There's 12 of them. And then your spinal nerves and where they go and what they do. So the glossopharyngeal is the one that helps you stabilize the pH, the carbon dioxide, and the oxygen. You also have these chemoreceptors in the aorta. So you've got them in the carotid and the aorta. And they do it through the vagus nerve, which is different than the glossopharyngeal nerve. But you still are getting the message to the brain, but you have two pathways you can do it. This is a picture that we looked at before, and there's your superior and inferior vena cava, and here's the aortic arch, and there are your baroreceptors, right in through there, through the arch. And then you have your chemoreceptors right there. So baroreceptors and chemoreceptors, and then the carotid bodies, the ones that are way up here in the carotid sinus, these are the ones that are sending it through the glossopharyngeal, and this is the one that's sending it through the vagus nerve. So we've already talked a lot about the capillaries and said it's the business end. This is where the action is. This is where you actually do something. But interestingly enough, you don't have capillaries in tendons ligaments, your outer skin, the cornea of your eye, and the lens of your eye. Well, it would make sense if you stop and think about it, because if you have blood vessels running through the lens of your eye or running across your cornea, you wouldn't be able to see. So we need that to be as crystal clear as we possibly can so that we can see well through our eyes. Now, sometimes proteins do deposit in the cornea or deposit in the lens, and then we call that cataracts. And so then they have to replace the cornea or they have to replace the lens. So I'm at that age where they're looking at my eyes going, it'll be soon. We're going to remove your cataracts. And most of my friends have already had cataract surgery. So I'm just a young thing because I'm not there yet. If you tear a tendon or you tear a ligament, it's really hard to heal because those epithelial cells have the information that you need in order to repair. So it's really hard to fix a tendon or ligament that got torn. And you can ask any basketball player or a football player because they always are tearing their knees out. And that they have to go in and shave the area, cut off the torn stuff, and try to sew it back together somehow to get it to go, because it doesn't heal like your skin does. And the epithelia, I don't know if I should tell you this, but when we were little kids in school, one of the cool things, you don't have blood vessels out in your outer skin. So we would bring a needle and thread and we would sew our fingers together through the epithelia, and it would just freak everybody out. So we were wild and crazy, but we didn't know why it didn't hurt, and we didn't know why it didn't bleed. But if you just take a very fine needle and just sew your fingers together, you can do that. So there you go. You can break down capillaries into 3 different kinds. So the ones that are usually, when you talk about a capillary, you're talking about the continuous capillaries. But some of them, you need to get stuff out, and you need to get big stuff out. So these capillaries actually have like little windows, and the word fenestration means window. So these have little windows, and larger stuff can come out. Now, in the continuous capillaries, you can pass oxygen and carbon dioxide across. You've got a lot of molecules that you can send across, like glucose and amino acids, things like that. But these fenestrated capillaries are where you got something bigger than that that's got to pass in and out. So if we're looking at these continuous capillaries, some of these continuous capillaries are held together with tight junctions, and you've probably heard of the blood-brain barrier. So it's really hard for things in the body to penetrate the blood-brain barrier and get in and hurt your brain. So this is made possible by the tight junctions of the continuous capillaries. So you get the glucose that the brain needs to function, but you don't get a lot of other things. Now, if you're taking fat-soluble drugs like LSD, they can go right through the blood-brain barrier because they can dissolve right through the capillaries. The fenestrated capillaries, you're going to find those in the kidneys, in the endocrine glands, and the small intestines. So I need bigger stuff. In the kidneys, there's some stuff I want to get out of my body. So I'm going to pass it through these fenestrations, these little windows in the capillaries, and then that way I can get it into the urine and get it out of my body. In the endocrine glands, we're going to study that later on. Those are the glands that make the hormones, and you need to get the hormones out there and into the bloodstream so they can do what they need to do. And so fenestrated capillaries are nice to have in a place where you're trying to get hormones out. Now, sinusoids, those are going to have like a holding chamber. They're a little bit wider, And they're also going to have larger holes. So it's not just little windows like the fenestrated capillaries, but there's actually holes big enough in these capillaries that a white blood cell can crawl out. So the object of the game is don't let all the blood out, because you want the blood into the tissue, but you do want for like a white blood cell to be able to crawl out and go do what it is that white blood cells do to protect us. So you're going to find sinusoids in your liver, your bone marrow, your spleen, places where you need cells to be able to move through, which they could not do through the fenestrations of the capillary. Those little windows are way too small. So here's a cartoon drawing where they're trying to show you what they think that the fenestrated capillary looks like. So there's your layer of endothelial cells. Right there, here's one. And these are the fenestrations or the pores or the windows that allow things out. Here's a red blood cell. Now that's an interesting thing because the size of the red blood cells is almost the size of the capillary. So a lot of times they can only go through single file. So that's kind of interesting. I have a video to show you in just a second of that. But here is a picture that they took of non-fenestrated and fenestrated. So those are the actual little windows. You can actually see them if you have an electron microscope, of course. If you and I looked at this under the microscope, we wouldn't be able to see these. They're that tiny. So they only let little molecules through. But anyway, I thought that was kind of neat. Almost looks like somebody took a hole punch and just made little divots. This is a video watching the blood go through a vein. Now, one of the things we didn't talk about veins yet is inside in the tunica intima, the internal layer, you actually have folds or cusps, just like you do in the heart. You don't have the papillary layer, and you don't have the heartstrings or anything like that, but you do have valves. And so here we have, this is blood, and here's the valve. So the blood goes through the valve, but it has trouble going backwards. Let's try that again. Pushing through, but not much can go backwards. Valves. Now, if you're going to do phlebotomy, you need to know about these valves, because if you try sticking a needle into a vein against the valve, you'll blow the valve. So you want the needle to go in from this direction, like this, coming in and pushing the valve open so that you can get blood. You don't want to come in this way and destroy the flaps of the valve. Instead of trying to memorize all the veins and which way the valves are pointing, all you have to do is put your finger on a blood vessel and look and see if it swells up that way or that way, because basically you're making a dam. You're putting pressure there so the blood can't continue on its pathway. So is this the part that's going to get larger here, or is this the part that's going to get larger here? So that's one of the things that Harvey taught us way back some 400 years ago, is that you can check for veins and the valves and the circulation. So this is one of the tricks that he showed to prove that our blood circulates. And I'm like a kid. I can't wait to unwrap Christmas presents. So in our next chapter, we're going to talk about the lymphatic system, and it has vessels like the blood vessels, but instead of carrying red blood cells, it just carries plasma and a few of your white blood cells. And this is what they look like. So here you see the fluid going through, and it also has valves, but because there aren't red blood cells in the way, you can see the valves opening and closing a little bit more easily. And you can see the white blood cells in there too. if the valve no longer works, then you're going to have blood that pools into the vessel, and it'll swell up. So a lot of the times varicose veins are these ropey looking things, and what you're looking at is just pooled blood because of the valves not working correctly. Now, you can go and pay somebody a little bit of money, and they have something that's a little bit like Gorilla Glue or whatever, the crazy glue stuff that you have, and they put it in there, and they'll just inject a little bit in, and it'll harden, and it'll block flow, and so you can get rid of your varicose veins. Because you have backup vessels. They wouldn't do it in any major vessel, obviously, because you can't block your major vessels, but these little irritating, unsightly ones, it's kind of cool. You can watch on YouTube, and they have little videos where they're just injecting just a little bit of the solution, and then poof, the varicose vein is gone, and the skin looks nice and pretty again. Now, if you happen to have varicose veins in your anus, this is what a hemorrhoid is. So the valves are shot in the vessels that nourish this part of the intestines, and so you get this bulging swelling where the blood is pooling in that area. So that's what a hemorrhoid is. And a lot of people, when they go to the bathroom and they have a little bit of blood on their stool, they think, oh, I've torn a hemorrhoid, or I've popped a hemorrhoid. As the poop is passing through, it can cause this to pop. So unfortunately, I know of 2 uncles and a friend of mine who thought that they just had hemorrhoids, and in fact they had colon cancer. So anytime you see blood streaking your feces, you need to go to the doctor and say, is it just a hemorrhoid, or is it colon cancer? Here's another video I wanted you to see. So blood comes out of the arteries and it branches off to the capillaries. So watch. There you go. See it going off to the capillaries there? Let's see if I can back that up again. There you go. There it coming through the artery and branching off. I wish I could slow it down so you could see it a little bit better. Once you get into the capillaries, you see that there really isn't a lot of pressure. So here is a capillary, and there are the red blood cells moving through. Oh, there's a couple of them that snuck by. So you see there's very gentle pressure. And I want to show you this picture because a lot of people don't realize when you reuse a needle, which they used to do. Nowadays, everybody gets a fresh, clean needle whenever they inject you. But when you put the needle in and you bring it out, these are red blood cells, and there's a white blood cell. So if you reuse this needle, you're going to be pushing all of these red blood cells, white blood cells, and any bacteria or viruses or anything like that, because there are diseases that are transmitted through blood, like hepatitis. So you definitely would not want that person to share a needle with you. So most people just have no clue how small a red blood cell is, and that's the tip of a needle. All right, one more picture before I go back to telling you more cool facts. But this is actually a capillary, and they've cut it open, and you can see the red blood cells coming down. Now this is a rather large capillary because you can have, looks like at least 4 across. And some of them are so small that literally they have to even fold up a little bit to make it through. Okay, I lied. I found one more picture I wanted to show you. Here's a mosquito, and it honestly looks like he's holding a straw. And he just pokes that right into your skin and starts sucking your blood up. But just like that needle that we saw, if he goes to somebody who has malaria and bites them or sucks up blood, and then goes and sticks this into someone else. It's just like sticking that needle in, and they can spread malaria this way. So there are diseases that are spread by ticks and by mosquitoes. And here's a capillary that is so small that you can only get one red blood cell through at a time. Here's a capillary branch. Look how the red blood cells can kind of bend around. I do want to point out on the slide, let's see, this is number 25, they misspell sphincter. There should be a P there. Sphincter and precapillary sphincters are those little one-celled smooth muscle cell that can shut off the blood flow. So precapillary sphincters. There you go. Spelled it correctly there. Just typographical error. I'll not ask you to memorize this, but it's interesting that at any one time, about 5% of the blood's in your capillaries, about 15% is in your arteries, 7% in your heart, 9% is over around your lungs, and 64% is running through your veins. So if you do the math, the veins plus the capillaries and the arteries make up about 84% of the blood at any one time, with just 9% being around the lungs and 7% in the heart. So if you're looking at a vein that is so thin that it has very little tunica externa, the external layer, and it only has 1 or 2 layers of smooth muscle in the middle part, then we're going to call those venules, and we're not even going to call them veins. Now, once you get up to veins, you still have a thin muscular layer, the middle layer, but you have a thicker tunica externa. And you're going to have those valves that I showed you. And if the valves aren't working correctly and stopping the blood from backflowing, then it's going to pool in the area where the shot vein is, and that's what you're going to call a varicose vein. Now, if you're walking, your muscles contract, and as your muscles contract, they push the blood up towards the heart. So, one of the questions that we're going to be asking in a minute is, how does the blood from my toes make it all the way back up to my heart? Well, if you're walking, you have no problem. You'll just be pushing it every time you take a step and squirting it back up towards the heart. But if you're sitting down, you are going to have blood pooling down in your feet and into your ankles and your legs. So it's recommended, if you're going to sit for very long, to elevate your legs. And that'll help the blood and the lymph drain out of your legs. But as long as you're walking, the skeletal muscle acts as a pump to push the blood in the veins back up to the heart. There are 4 large veins that they want you to know. So one of them we've talked a lot about is the superior and the inferior vena cava. And when you add the E, it means plural, vena cava. And then the pulmonary veins, those are those that are going back from the lungs, back to the heart to drop off the blood. The internal jugular veins. So even though it's a vein, if you cut your jugular vein from a car wreck where you go through the windshield, or somebody pulls a knife and slices you on the neck, any of those things, you'll bleed out so fast they probably can't save you. And then the renal veins, the ones that are coming out of the kidneys. So those are huge. These are really large ones. We talked about varicose veins and what causes it. The ones that cause the ones in your legs usually are because you're fat and it's hard for the blood to get up, and so it actually just puts so much pressure that it finally just ruptures the flaps or the cusps of the valves. and pregnancy. Unfortunately, a lot of women start out looking nice, and then by the time that they've had that baby and that big sack full of water, it has put so much pressure on them that they start having varicose veins. If you do not drink enough fluids, if you have dry poop, it doesn't come out easily, then you're just asking for varicose veins, because as the fecal mass is trying to push through the rectum and through the anus, you're going to mess up the valves. And so then you're going to have the swelling and the varicosity. And you can go in and have them removed with lasers. In the olden days, they used to tie a string around them and strangle them. Here's a picture from your book of varicose veins. These are really ropey looking ones. All right, so how does the blood flow? All right, we know the heart. So we're coming out of the heart, we're going through an artery, and the arteries branch out into small arteries called arterioles. They branch out to capillaries, and then the capillaries come over to venules, or teeny tiny veins, and then the veins fuse together to make, or venules fuse together to make veins, and then the veins dump back in the heart. So that is the way that almost all of your blood circulation occurs. But there are two big exceptions, and you need to know what they are. So we've already talked about one of them. So I'm going from the heart to the artery to the arteriole. Oh man, I need the blood quickly back to the heart, so I'm going to bypass the capillaries, go through a mid-arteriole, over to the venule, and then back to the heart. And so I just bypass the capillaries altogether. So we talked about the mid-arteriole, or the one that runs through the middle. Another one is called the portal system. Here's one of the most commonly talked about portal systems. So when you're talking about hormones, you have the hypothalamus, and then below it, you have the pituitary gland. So here's the pituitary, and here's the hypothalamus. And they need to talk to each other. They need to send hormone signals, because the hypothalamus is the one that says, hey, turn on and do something, pituitary, send out hormones, or stop, you've made enough, I don't need you to make any more. So this is the part that's going to be talking to this, but they're not connected. So hormones are squirted out into the blood system, and they're carried throughout the body. Well, that would be a real waste in this particular case, because I need the hormones right here to talk to this right here. So instead of going like we did before, where we went from the heart to the arteries to the capillaries to the venules and then on back, we're going to have two capillary beds that are talking to each other. So here's the capillary bed right here that's going to be picking up the hormones that are coming out of the hypothalamus. And then here you have the capillary bed that is around the pituitary gland. So all I have to do is put it into this capillary bed, which is connected to this capillary bed, and now this hormone can go into these cells and talk to the cells and tell whichever cells that are needed to turn on and make certain hormones. So if you need two organs to talk to each other that are close by, I don't want this to go all the way and have to go all the way to the heart and then come all the way back. So I'm going to have two capillary beds, one right after the other. And then I'm going to join up with the venules, and then I'm going to go to the heart. So these can talk to each other. So you have three of these systems that are called portal systems. Another one is in your kidneys. So your kidneys can talk to different parts of the kidneys. And then between your intestines and your liver. So there is chemical information that needs to pass between the intestines and the liver. So Anyway, portal systems are kind of neat, but it's just two capillary beds, one right after the other, so you don't have to go all the way through the heart just to talk to a nearby bunch of cells. And as I promised you on our first slide, we're going to talk about anastomoses. So this is a really complicated picture, but if you stare at it, it's not too bad. So here's your typical pathway right here. This is the way most things occur. And so the blood comes in the superior and inferior vena cava, goes through the heart, goes to the lungs, goes out the aortic arch, branches off into arteries, arterioles, capillaries. Capillaries come together, venules, veins, and you go back. So that is your simple circuit. That is the way most of them occur. This is the portal system. Did the same sort of thing, but instead of just having one capillary bed, I've got two capillary beds. And so they left out the interesting part, which is like if this was the intestines and this was the liver, or if this was the if this was the hypothalamus and this was the pituitary, then, or this would be the hypothalamus here, and this would be the pituitary over here, because that's the way they talk. Now, what an anastomosis is, it is a shunt. It is a place where you have an alternate pathway. So when the blood is coming down from the artery, it can either go like normal through a set of capillaries and then go back to the heart, or there is another connection right here, an anastomosis or a shunt. So it is an alternate pathway. It's like whether you're going to go around New Circle or whether you're going to go around Manowar, or if you're going to go through neighborhoods to get wherever it is you're going. So you have an alternate route that will still get you back to the superior and inferior vena cava and back to the heart. So you can have these where an artery and a vein makes an anastomosis, or you can have an artery connecting with an artery. So look at these. This blood can go this way, or it can come down here. It could go here and come back up there, or go down there. So you have pathways. And this redundancy, or this other way, if this one got occluded and stopped up, that's fine. I can still bypass it and go this way or this way. So there's other pathways I can take. So anastomoses are actually beneficial usually, but your book is talking about, well, if you have too many anastomoses, then you don't get blood flow to your fingers, and then your fingers and your nose get frostbite. See, because you can actually bypass the capillary bed. And the capillary bed, one of the things that it does, besides exchange nutrients and things, it also warms you up. It's carrying nice warm blood that's come from the inside of your body, and it's carrying it down under your fingers and onto your cheeks, and it warms you up. So if you bypass it and say, nope, I'm not even going that way, I'm going to go this way, and then this area will get colder and colder. And so you'll get frostbite on your nose and your ears and your fingertips or your toes. A lot of people with frostbite, they lose their toes because there's so much tissue necrosis that the cells can't live anymore. So you can have venous anastomosis, arterial anastomosis, or a venous artery or arteriovenous anastomosis. So there's 3 different ways of hooking it up. This slide tells us what we're about to learn. So it says, this is what we're going to look at. We're going to look at the relationship between blood pressure, resistance, and flow, and how blood pressure is measured, how the pulse is measured, 3 things that determine resistance to blood flow, blood vessel diameter, and why that's super important, and then how do you control all this stuff locally, using your nerves and your brain, and using your hormones. So we'll touch down on some of that stuff. All right, now most people, when they see a chemical formula like this, they immediately go, okay, I don't do math, and I don't even care what that means. I'm just going to skip that, and if they ask it on the test, I'll flunk it. So I've had so many students, and they can just say it just like that, as fast as I did it. But this is talking about the flow, blood flow, so that's the F, is proportional to the pressure, the difference in pressure. So this little delta means subtract the highest pressure from the lowest pressure. Well, we can do that because we're just going to take that hypothetical person that has a blood pressure of 125 over 75, and we're just going to subtract those two. That's what that means. Subtract. This is the difference between the highest and lowest pressure. And we're going to divide it by the resistance. How hard is it to get through that vessel? Well, it's pretty hard to get through a capillary. I mean, you got to go through single file. But is it hard to get through the arteries? Now you're talking some problems if you can't get through the arteries because you've got hardening of the arteries, you got calcium plaques in there, or you have atherosclerosis where you have big fatty wads that are clogging up your blood vessels. So all this is saying is if you have a higher percentage or difference in pressure, you're going to get more flow. Well, you know that. Turn on your garden hose. Just turn it on a little bit. You don't have much pressure, so you're not going to get much flow. So you go back over, you turn your garden hose on higher. So now you have more pressure, and so you get more flow. So this is just a really fancy way of writing. The more pressure you have, the more flow you get. And if you have resistance, it's going to slow down the flow. So this is just a fancy way of saying something that you pretty much already know anyway. In order to take blood pressure, use a blood pressure cuff. That's what you and I say, but if you want to use the proper word for it, it is a sphygmomanometer. The pH sounds like an F, sphygmomanometer. So if you want to sound really cultured and smart, you can use that instead of blood pressure cuff. Now, you're going to put it up on the upper arm above your elbow, and there's going to be a black tube hanging off of it, and you want that black tube to run down the arm. You want that black tube to run down your arm all the way toward your thumb, because coming up from the thumb and above the wrist is where your radial artery is. So you want the cuff up over your brachial artery, which then comes down and branches out, and then you have your radial artery around your wrist, and that's the one where you take your pulse. So you're going to get the systolic pressure, which is the highest pressure that is in that artery. So that's what's coming out of the heart, and you're measuring it in the upper arm. And then you're measuring once the blood has passed through and the artery is relaxing, how much pressure is there still in there even when it's relaxed. So healthy, you want that lower. So this is if you are a young adult, and it doesn't say if you're a boy or girl, you should be about 120 over 75. That's really kind of low. That would be an athletic young adult. All right, here's another piece of math that I would like for you guys to be able to do because you're supposed to be doing it in lab and you're supposed to be able to figure it out in lecture, and it's not all that hard. So you take the diastolic pressure and you add that to 1/3 of the pulse pressure. Well, if you remember from the slide that I went over just a second ago, all you do is you take your highest reading, which would be like 125, and subtract your lowest. So 125 minus 75, it should be, what, 45? And you take 1/3 of that, which would be 15, and you add it to the diastolic pressure, or the lowest pressure, which we said was 75. So 75 plus 15 is 90. All right, so that is your mean arterial pressure. I hope I didn't do the math wrong, because that would be embarrassing. All right, so we know that whatever this mean arterial pressure is a predictor of whether or not you are going to have edema, which is the swelling where the fluid is pushed out of your capillaries so fast that you can't get it back up to the heart. And so it remains in the tissues. And the tissues are literally kind of feel spongy, and they look really fat. And fainting, if you don't have enough pressure, when you stand up, all the blood runs out of your head and you just pass out. Just like somebody shot you. Just, boom, you're down. And atherosclerosis, if you're not able to push the blood through, then that means that there's something clogging up your arteries. So atherosclerosis is a thickening or narrowing or a hardening of your arteries. Kidney failure, that's gonna, you can't pee out the fluid that you need to because your kidneys aren't working correctly. So that's definitely going to mess with your blood pressure and your blood flow. And of course, an aneurysm. If you've popped a blood vessel, then it's going to be running out there. It's going to take the path of least resistance. So it's easier to go out the hole than it is to try and push its way through your whole body. So they want you to know how to calculate MAP. So practice that when it's not that hard. If I can do it, you can do it. Just in case you don't know what I'm talking about when I say edema, this is edema. And if you were to push that in, it would feel like you were pushing in biscuit dough. For those of you who've never made biscuit dough or made homemade bread, you don't know what I'm talking about. But it is spongy and feels really weird. So edema, swelling. Syncope. Syncope is a fancy way of saying fainting. So you don't have enough blood flow to your head, so you pass out. You have syncope. This is a kind of an interesting graph. They're showing you as the blood comes out of the heart, you can see, from 75 or 80 up to 120, 125, and then dropping down and up and down. And as you go through and you get to smaller arteries, you have less pressure and less pressure. And then when you get to the small arteries, you have almost none. And you get to the arterioles, and you're almost, and in the capillaries, you don't have pressure. And then coming on back. So you're going to have gravity helping you to get this blood back to the heart. You're going to have the skeletal muscles working. Other ways that the blood returns to the heart, since it's not getting there from pressure, is you actually have a kind of a sucking in the heart, because once the heart squeezes and pushes the blood out, and then it relaxes, it kind of makes a little suction, and that helps pull the blood back into the heart. So you get a little bit there, and then if you think about it, your diaphragm is moving up and down every time you breathe, and so that's going to help push the blood back into the heart too. So you've got your skeletal muscle where you're walking or you're moving, your diaphragm is help pushing it in. The lymphatic system, which you don't know anything about the lymphatic system yet because we haven't gotten to chapter 21, but it is also pulling in fluid out of your tissues and returning it to the heart. So we have that going on. And if you work in the medical profession, or if you go into the Air Force, oddly enough, you'll learn about what they call a pressurized G-suit, or inflatable things that they can actually put on your legs, and you can artificially or externally inflate them, and it will push your legs, and it'll push the fluid out of your legs and push it back up. So if you're in one of those planes that goes so incredibly fast, it can actually pull the blood, and your body has trouble pushing the blood up to the brain. So if you're wearing these, sometimes they're just legs, it's like inflatable pants that you're wearing that go over your legs and not up. So depending on what kind of suit that you have, if you're in the hospital and you're suffering from edema in the hospital, sometimes they'll prescribe these inflatable G suits for you. Like I said, it looks like a pair of pants they put on, and then they blow them up. And so it's putting pressure on your legs to push the fluid up. Sometimes they just give you socks. They call them TEDS, TEDS, TEDS socks. And they're just super elastic. And so they kind of help you because they won't let the blood come out and pool in your tissues. So it puts a lot of pressure on your legs to keep your legs from swelling. So it is a bit of a trick to get the blood back to the heart because you don't have the pressure that you had from the arteries that pushed it all the way to the organs. Now you need to get it away from the organs and away from the tissues and back to the heart with no pressure. Here's a quick little summary of what happens if you have high blood pressure. High blood pressure is if you're over 140, over 90, and you're not an old person. It can weaken your arteries. It can cause aneurysms where it starts bulging out and it can rupture. And they say that it damages the lining of the tunica intima or the tunica interna, and it can cause fat to deposit. So you can cause scarring, you can have fatty deposits. They claim that this is because of hypertension. Hypotension, you don't have a high enough blood pressure. And so if you're resting, you're just sitting there and your blood pressure is super, super low, it's probably because you've lost blood, you have not drunk enough fluids. This is chronic. Americans tend to have a problem with drinking enough fluids. And old people, unless you give them a glass of water and make them drink it, they just don't think about getting up and going in the kitchen and getting a glass of water. So dehydration is very common, especially in the elderly. And anemia, especially kids nowadays, they're experimenting with being vegans, vegetarians, but they don't research it very well. And so they end up not getting enough iron in their diet and enough of the things that you need to make hemoglobin. And so they're anemic. So that is very common. I've seen a lot of students and they come in all pasty and pale and kind of weird looking. And I say, are you a vegetarian? They go, yeah, how'd you know? I'm like, I don't think I can tell you because then you'll get really, really mad at me. So you've got high blood pressure or you've got low blood pressure. How can you fix it? Well, there's 3 things you can do. One of them is you can change your cardiac output. So athletes know this. If you work out, your blood pressure will drop. Your heart is such an efficient machine that you don't even have to have your heart beat that often. So that's your cardiac output. You do that by exercising, and they talk about cardio exercise. So they always want you to do cardio exercise and get your heart strong before you start doing other kinds of exercises. Because otherwise your blood pressure could shoot up so high if you just jump into exercising. It's like, I can't stand it. I've got to lose weight. I'm just going to start going to the gym and working out for 2 hours. You could give yourself a heart attack doing that. So you want to do cardio for about a month until you've got your heart strong enough, and then get into all the other stuff that they've got there in the gym for you. And a good trainer will do cardio with you before they start putting you through some of the more rigorous workouts. Your blood volume. How can you regulate your blood volume? Well, you can drink more because that'll increase your volume. Have your hormones checked. because a lot of people who have problems with their blood pressure is because their hormones are off. And we'll talk about that in just a second. And resistance to flow. So they can actually listen to your arteries. They put the stethoscope, instead of just listening to your heart, they can listen on your neck. We have all sorts of ultrasound that can look inside of your vessels and see if you've got blockage. The ones in the neck, and the older people tend to get blockage in their neck. So that's really important. If you've got a grandma or grandpa that starts to act kind of weird, you might look and see if there's the blockage to the arteries that are supplying the brain. And the kidneys. If your kidneys are functioning correctly, they can help you with your blood pressure. They are the number one thing that regulates your blood volume. So you can just pee out extra fluid if you've got too much fluid, and that'll lower your blood pressure. Or if your blood pressure is too low, then you stop peeing. But then you have toxic substances build up in your body. So that's probably not a good thing to do, but it's what the kidneys are going to do for you, whether you want them to or not. So kidneys have the largest influence on the blood pressure of any organ besides the heart, of course, itself. How hard it is to get your blood to flow through and go where it needs to go. We call this peripheral resistance. That's how hard it is for blood to go through the vessels. There are three things that determine this. How thick your blood is. So do you have too many red blood cells? If so, your blood's too thick and you're going to be having problems pushing it through. Is your blood too thin because you can't make enough red blood cells? You're anemic. The length of your vessels. Now, this is kind of set. You can grow new blood vessels, but usually that's over time. So that's not going to take, that's not going to fix anything right away. So this one's kind of, the length of your blood vessel determines part of your peripheral resistance, because the further you have to go, the more friction you're going to encounter, and the slower you're going to be able to go. So, but you can't really fix this vessel length. And the blood viscosity, unless they do some medication or actually bleed you and take some of your blood out, or give you some medicine that causes you to pee some of your fluid out. They have those. They're called diuretics. This one's fairly set also. But the one thing that you can change, and you are changing constantly, even while you're listening to me, is how big around your blood vessel is. Because remember, you've got muscle there, and so you can contract it. And you can squeeze your veins, you can squeeze your arteries, and even with our capillaries, we've got that little capillary sphincter, that little one strand of smooth muscle that can pinch off the capillary and just shut off blood flow to it. So the radius or the diameter of the vessel is one thing we can change, and these not so much. The kidney can help us with this one. All right. If you have problems with your kidneys, your albumin level will be wrong. So your red blood cells, how many of those you have, and how much albumin that you have in your plasma are the main thing that causes your blood to be viscous, thicker than water. Viscous means thicker than water. Low viscosity, you don't have enough red blood cells, and if you don't have albumin, if you can't make albumin, if your diet is bad, or you tend to bleed a lot, like women who have really heavy periods, or people who have bleeding ulcers, where they're actually bleeding their blood out through the sores in the usually it's in the upper part of the intestines where it leaves the stomach, the duodenal ulcer. But you can have ulcers in your stomach too. Polycythemia, too many blood cells. not drinking water. So you literally dry up your plasma. And so now you just have too many cells and not enough plasma to lubricate them. So these are things that deal with the viscosity. The vessel length, the farther you have to go, the more friction you have. So that's kind of duh. And let's see. Laminar flow. In the edges of your blood vessel, over there by the tunica intima, you have very little blood flow. It's very slow there, but in the middle of the vessel, then the blood is flowing really, really fast. And in your book, they talk about a river. If you're on the bank of a river, then the river is kind of going a little bit slower along the banks. But if you go out into the middle of the river, then that's where you don't have as much friction, and it's going to be flowing much more rapidly out in the middle than it is up near the shore. So anybody who's been out in a boat can kind of tell you about that. So they have a mathematical formula. I don't care whether you learn it or not, because I'm not going to ask it of you. So the technical term for the contraction of your blood vessel or changing the diameter to make it smaller is vasoconstriction. And you do that with your tunica media or the muscular layer. Vasodilation, that is where you open it up. You relax it to the maximum diameter or radius that you can get. So what causes that? We're going to talk about that. You have a vasomotor center in your medulla oblongata. So a lot of us talk about our brain stem. So you come up your spinal cord and you have your brain stem, and you have an area called the medulla oblongata. So you learn about that when you learn the brain, the parts of the brain. So vasodilation, vasoconstriction, you need to know those. But basically, it's either the relaxing or the contracting of the muscle under the control of either a chemical that's nearby or like adrenaline. Adrenaline will definitely change the diameter of a blood vessel. Or if you've got histamine that was released, then you're going to have fluid running into the area, and you're going to have vasodilation so that you can allow the fluid to run into the area. So there's chemicals in the area, and then you have hormones. So again, the kidney has to talk to the blood vessels and talk to the heart, and it does it by way of hormones. So it just puts them out into the bloodstream, and they circulate where they need to go and cause either the vasoconstriction or the vasodilation. And so you can do it with your nerves, like with the medulla oblongata. You can do it with hormones, and you can do it with just locally found chemicals that happen to be in that area that will cause vasoconstriction and vasodilation. So this is the artist rendition or the artist's view of this is an arteriole. This is what it looks like relaxed, and this is what it looks like contracted. So this is the same one, and this was drawn from electron micrograph pictures. So even though this is a cartoon or an artist representation, it is drawn from a picture that was made from an electron microscope. So here's your little slide summarizing what I just said. Local control, chemicals in the region, neural control, this is the brain and the nerves, and then hormones that are coming out into the bloodstream, some coming from the pituitary, some coming from the kidneys. And in the local control, this is the chemicals in that particular area. If you don't get enough blood into the tissue, then the waste from all the cells that make up the tissue will build up in the area. And so you're going to get this more and more waste accumulating, more and more waste. And these waste will cause the blood vessels to dilate, vasodilation. So as soon as you can open it up, then you can dump more waste in and carry the waste away faster. So just the presence of waste in the tissue will cause the blood vessels to swell up or to vasodilate. And once you carry the waste away, then the vessels go back to the normal where they should be. They talk about histamine. I talked about histamine. Bradykinin, we have not talked about that, and prostaglandins. So these are other chemicals that are released by platelets and by those squamous epithelial cells, which we call the endothelial cells because they're inside the blood vessel. And prostaglandins actually are responsible for our pain. So that's kind of an interesting thing. But it will cause your blood vessels to open up also. So a lot of times people say they have a headache, and what's interesting is you can't feel pain in the brain. The brain understands pain, but it can't feel pain. So if you say, well, I don't know what you're talking about, because, man, I get a headache, I feel like the top of my head's going to blow off. What you're having is vascular spasms or contractions and relaxations of your blood vessels. So a headache is actually a pain in your blood vessels, not in the cells of your brain itself. So that's kind of an odd thing. And what's even odder than that is because you don't have any pain receptors in your brain, so you don't feel pain in your brain. If they do brain surgery on you, they don't put you to sleep because they don't need to, because it doesn't hurt. They have to numb your skin so they can get through your skin, but the brain itself, so that's kind of weird. I want to talk a little bit about this concept, hyperemia and angiogenesis. So hyperemia is kind of a rebound. So if you cut off blood supply and then you suddenly restore blood supply, the flow will increase above normal until you get back to normal, and then it'll level out. So you get like a rebound effect. And I was babysitting my grandson, and it was so funny because he was leaning up against me, and we were looking at something, and then he leaned back, and he looked at me so funny, and he grabbed his arm, and he said, Grandma, my arm feels funny. It feels all prickly, and like something is crawling around in my arm. And I realized that he was having, we call it going to sleep. Your arm goes to sleep. If you sleep funny and you wake up and your arm's tingling, it's because you shut off blood flow. And then when you roll over, all of a sudden the blood starts flowing back in and you get that weird tingling feeling. So it was kind of interesting to see a little kid feel that for the first time and explain it, with his little kid words. So that was kind of cute. So hyperemia, hyper, too much. Emia, blood, too much blood. So cut off the blood flow, and when it comes back, it'll come back too hard for a little while, and then it'll go back to normal. Now, angiogenesis, this is where you actually grow new blood vessels. So when would you grow new blood vessels? Well, girls do it every month because we slough off the lining of our uterus and then we have to grow it back again. And then we slough it off again and then we grow it back again. So we call these monthly cycles. So for women, we're used to doing it in our uterine lining. If your heart is not getting enough blood flow, you can actually have your heart grow new blood vessels to bypass the area where it's being blocked. So that's good. This is a good thing. If you are exercising and you are running and you're building new muscles, you've got to get blood to all that new muscle and that new bulk that you're putting on. Or if you're getting fat, you've got to get blood vessels to nourish that new tissue. So exercise or lack of exercise can cause angiogenesis, or the growth of new blood vessels. And one of the things that a tumor has to have is it has to have its own blood source. So a tumor is more cells than should be in an area. So you can actually feel them if they're close enough to the surface. Like women are always supposed to be feeling for breast lumps. So they're growing extra tissue in their breast it isn't supposed to be there. In order to maintain that tissue, you've got to grow new blood vessels. Now, a long time ago, they had a drug called thalidomide, and it was fabulous. It had, so many drugs have all these yucky side effects, but this one didn't have side effects, and it totally mellowed you out. It made you so peaceful and happy and calm. And somebody got the idea, hey, why don't we give this to pregnant women? Because sometimes pregnant women are I'm trying to think of a polite word that sounds like witch. They can be really mean and snapping. So they thought, oh man, we're going to use this tranquilizer thalidomide, and it'll stop the irritability, and it'll stop the vomiting, the morning sickness and all the misery, that some people experience. I was pregnant several times and I enjoyed it, but I did have morning sickness. But I would not take any medicines because I knew that anything I took, the baby would be getting in a much higher dose. So, unfortunately, the people who took thalidomide who were pregnant, they ended up having babies that didn't have arms or didn't have legs. So they just had like hands attached to their shoulder without an arm. Here's a picture of a child who was born to a mother who took thalidomide. And you can see that there's the fingers and the hand, but there's no arm there. And you can see that there's very little in the way of a leg right there. There's just the foot. So they immediately took it off the market because, this is a horrible thing. Well, they didn't stop to figure out why it did this until recently. So come to find out, what thalidomide would do is it stopped the growth of blood vessels. So the mother was trying to grow a baby inside of her, and this drug that she was taking to make her peaceful and calm and not having anxiety and not having morning sickness was actually stopping the baby from being able to grow new blood vessels. And so they couldn't grow the arms, they couldn't grow the legs, so they couldn't lengthen. So now that this has been many decades ago, people stopped and thought, oh my goodness, this would be a wonderful cancer drug. Because if you have cancer, you're obviously upset about it. You're worried. You're facing your own mortality, because a lot of people who have cancer die. And so here is a drug, thalidomide, which it calms you down, it makes you peaceful, and it stops the growth of blood vessels. So the tumor that's trying to grow inside of you can't get blood. So it can't get blood vessels to grow into it and around it. So it can't get any bigger. And hopefully your immune system can then kill it. Or you can have surgery and cut it out before it metastasizes and gets into your bloodstream and spreads to other part of your body. So we may see more thalidomide use now, but they banned it because it causes babies to be born messed up. But if you're not pregnant, then it doesn't really affect you, except for it will stop you from growing new blood vessels. In this next slide, if you stop and think about it, this makes sense. So we talked about an old person who stands up too quickly and all of a sudden they faint. They have syncope or they lose clarity in their mind. You know, they're dizzy and disoriented and have to sit there for a minute. So that's because they don't have enough blood going up to their head because they stood up too quickly. So the baroreflex, the pressure, is going to increase the blood pressure. So that next time that person stands up, they have enough blood pressure to maintain blood flow to the brain. So if you stop and think about it, that makes sense. The baroreflex is going to increase the blood pressure. And it goes through and tells you how it does it through the glossopharyngeal nerve and all of this stuff like that. So you're welcome to read through that. Here's a few terms I'd like for you guys to learn. Some of them you already know. One of them you probably never seen before in your life. So we talked about if you have waste that are building up in the area because you don't have sufficient blood flow, one of the things you're going to have if you don't have sufficient blood flow is you're not going to get enough oxygen, and that's called hypoxemia. And hypercapnia is too much carbon dioxide. So this one you've probably never seen before. So hyper means too much. And you just need to know that this word right there means carbon dioxide. And acidosis. So you have acid buildup in the region, and that's also toxic. So any of these things right here will stimulate chemical receptors or chemoreceptors, and they will cause the blood to come into the area and wash away the waste, to bring you oxygen, to take away the excess carbon dioxide, and to dilute the acid. Here's another word that I want you guys to know. It's ischemia or ischemia. Ischemia, as it's usually called. And that's where you don't get enough blood. Another one down here at the bottom I mentioned. If you are stressed out, it will affect your blood pressure. If you are angry, it will affect your blood pressure. And obviously, if you're sexually aroused, that'll do it too. I normally wouldn't spend too much time on this slide, but because this is the time of COVID and we're seeing some weird stuff going on, I want to tell you about it and see if you can figure it out. A lot of people don't talk about hormones because they're complicated. There's hormones that turn things on, there's things that turn it off, and there's all sorts of interactions between hormones. But this one is one that should be a little bit familiar to you if you're reading anything about COVID at all. So one of the hormones that influences your blood pressure by being vasoactive and doing your changing your water balance, one of them is angiotensin 2. So it will raise your blood pressure and it will cause your blood vessels to contract or constrict, to close off. So it's potent vasoconstriction and raising your blood pressure. So in order to get angiotensin 2, the synthesis of it or the making of it or the activation of it requires angiotensin converting enzyme. And we call this ACE for short. So it will convert a precursor into angiotensin 2, and then once you've got the angiotensin 2, it will cause vasoconstriction and raise your blood pressure. The receptor that the ACE enzyme is attracted to. There's a receptor that it has to sit on in order to cause the cell to do what you need it to do this whole angiotensin thing and the blood pressure and all of that. That is the receptor that COVID attaches to. So COVID has an invitation into the cells of our lungs because we have these ACE2 receptors on the surface. Now, if you've got COVID sitting in the receptor and taking over those cells, then you can't put this ACE enzyme, or hormone rather, in the receptor because it's already taken up by this COVID. So it's like if there's only one seat on the bus and the COVID gets to sit in the seat, then this ACE or this angiotensin converting enzyme can't sit in the seat because it's already occupied. So you're going to have problems with your angiotensin, you're going to have trouble with your blood pressure, and one of the things that they're seeing with some of the people with COVID is they have blood clots. So if you're not getting enough blood flow and the blood slows down in your circulatory system, it'll start clotting. So you need to keep it going at a certain speed to prevent clots. So anyway, this might be interesting to study and understand and go into a little more detail than you normally would because of COVID and this. Not everybody has this. And then, of course, the medicines. It says hypertension is often treated with ACE inhibitors. So if you take ACE inhibitors, a lot of times you'll grow more of those receptors. So are you inviting in more COVID? Is that why some people have a really bad time with COVID and other people it's just like a common cold? So this is something that you guys maybe should be studying and reading up on in the news. Another hormone that is important in controlling your blood pressure is aldosterone. And this is a hormone that is secreted from the adrenals above the kidney. Is one of the main places you're going to have that. And it tells the kidneys not to pee out sodium. Normally, if you have too much sodium in your body, you just pee the extra out. That's why you can eat pretzels without dying, because they're just covered with salt. But it's considered to be the salt-retaining hormone. Well, if you retain salt, you don't pee it out, you're going to have to hold water too because it has to dilute the salt. So it's going to increase your blood pressure. For every hormone, there's going to be an opposite hormone. So the one that is the antagonist or the opposite of aldosterone is natriuretic peptide. Natriuretic peptide. This is from the word natrium, which means sodium. So this one, the sodium peptide, causes you to increase the peeing out of sodium. So as you're peeing out the sodium, you're also peeing out the fluid because it will go with it, and it will lower your blood volume. And if you lower your blood volume, you lower your blood pressure. It also promotes vasodilation. So you have more room for the blood, so it's going to lower your blood pressure. So some people need their blood pressure lowered, and that secreted by the heart will do it for you. But if you have too low blood pressure, then you're going to make more aldosterone. Or if you have trouble holding sodium in your body, there are some conditions where you can't hold sodium in your body. So even though you're eating it, it comes out. So it mimics too much aldosterone. Another hormone that comes out of the pituitary is anti-diuretic hormone. So anti means no, don't do it. And diuretic means pee. So the anti-diuretic hormone says, no, don't pee. So it promotes water retention, and because you have more water, you have elevated blood pressure, and it also constricts your blood vessels. And then you have things like epinephrine and norepinephrine. Remember, epinephrine is what everyone else in the world calls adrenaline. In America, we call it adrenaline. Everywhere else, they call it epinephrine. And it has a mixed bag because in your legs, it's going to open those blood vessels wide open. So you got all the blood you need running into your legs so that if there's a bear behind you, you're going to run. So it's going to open up some blood vessels, and in other blood vessels, it's going to cause vasoconstriction. Because if I'm being chased by a bear, I don't care whether I'm digesting my food. I don't really care at all. So I just need to go ahead and shut all that blood flow off so that I'm not digesting my food. So it's going to selectively open up some blood vessels and close off the majority of them. So you've got more blood to allow you to have fight or flight. So you've got more into your arms so you can hit, and more in your legs so you can run. So this slide kind of summarizes what I said in a much more elegant manner. The reason you would have vasodilation and vasoconstriction is to route blood from one body region to another. So like I said, I don't care about digesting food when I'm being faced by a bear. I just want to be able to run or hit it in the nose if I think that that might make it not eat me. And if you are dehydrated or you are hemorrhaging, you're bleeding because you were in a car wreck or something, then you're going to increase the blood pressure trying to keep blood going to the brain. Because as long as your brain is functioning, you can maybe figure a way out of whatever the problem is. But a lot of people who get dehydrated start doing really strange things. One of our teachers didn't show up for work one time, and they went over to her apartment, and she was literally walking into the wall. She didn't realize it. She was trying to get somewhere. She didn't know where she was trying to get, but because she was sick and she hadn't been drinking and she was dehydrated, she was literally walking into the wall and falling down. So we got her to the hospital, got her hydrated, and got some medicine into her, and she was fine. But it was freaky as heck to find somebody that dehydrated acting that weird. Here's two examples. If you're out exercising, you're going to open up the arteries in your lungs because you need more oxygen, your heart, and your muscles because you need them for exercising. But you're not going to be processing in your kidneys like you should be. So you have vasoconstriction in your kidneys, so you're not going to be making pee. And in your digestive tract. Seems like the digestive tract is always being shut off. It's like, no, 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 no. You know, we need the blood for something else. You're the last choice. But if you're dozing in an armchair after a big meal, then you are going to redirect blood to your intestines and to your digestive tract. So it's like, okay, now's a good time. I don't need blood in my arms and legs because I'm not going to be doing anything except laying in this chair. So let's digest our food. And then a lot of times you wake up and you're like, oh, and I need to pee. I got a kick out of this slide. So this is in case you don't know what it looks like to fall asleep in an armchair, and this is what it looks like to exercise. Just in case you guys don't know, here's a picture to tell you which is which. Slide 77 is interesting because it tells you what the capillaries are doing. So water is going in and out of the capillaries, oxygen, carbon dioxide, I was going to say it has to be there, glucose, that's a biggie, amino acids, lipids, which is another name for fats, minerals, calcium, potassium, things like that, antibodies. So we're learning about antibodies, whether we want to or not, because of the COVID vaccine. Hormones can move in and out through capillary walls, and of course the waste can move, and ammonia. So we really don't think too much about ammonia. I mean, that's the stuff that you mop your floors with, and it smells really bad. But then once it's evaporated, it's nice, and your house smells clean. So a lot of people like to clean with ammonia. But this is deadly if it builds up in your body. So a lot of people who die, they say, well, they died from, cancer. Well, they actually didn't. They died because ammonia built up in their bloodstream to the point where they couldn't take care of it, and it killed them. But they were already dying from cancer or emphysema or something like that. So the buildup of ammonia and kidney failure is actually the way most people die. But they don't put that on the death certificate because you built up your ammonia and your kidneys failed because of whatever it was already killing you. All right, we've already talked about fenestrations, diffusion, transcytosis, filtration, reabsorption. Okay, diffusion is just spreading. If you've got more sugar inside the capillary than you have outside, then the sugar is going to diffuse out of the capillary. If you've got more carbon dioxide outside the capillary than you have inside, then it's going to go. So whatever is at higher concentration is going to move to an area of lower concentration. So it can either diffuse in or it can diffuse out. Now, if there's something on one side of the capillary that I need to either pull out of the capillary or bring into the capillary, I can do transcytosis, which basically is you take the cell membrane and wrap it around whatever it is you want to transport, and we call that endocytosis. You're bringing it into the cell. And then you have mechanisms inside, you have proteins, and it pushes it over to the other side and pushes it out. And that's exocytosis. So transcytosis is endocytosis followed by exocytosis. But the end effect is you move something from one side, from the outside of the cell, to the other side and outside the other side of the cell. So this is how you bring stuff into the capillaries, and this is how you can take stuff out of the capillaries and give it to the tissues. So that's a big word. I want to make sure that you guys know about that. And then filtration, that would be these fenestrations. And then the sinusoids, which not only allow filtration, but it can actually allow whole cells to go through the holes. Anything that is fat soluble or lipid soluble doesn't have to do any of that transcytosis that we were talking about, the endocytosis and the exocytosis. Fat soluble things, they just pop right across because the cell membrane is fat. So it just goes right through that phospholipid bilayer and goes wherever it needs to go. So all of your steroid hormones can easily go right through cells. They don't need any transport mechanism. So steroid hormones would be like estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, hydrocortisone. Those are all steroid hormones. They're made out of cholesterol. So they freely move in and out of cells. Oxygen and carbon dioxide can freely diffuse, so they don't have to have a transport mechanism to get them to move through. And large particles, big proteins, they don't go out of the capillary. They're carried on and continue on through the circulatory system. That transcytosis, it says it's very little of the solute exchange across the capillary walls, but it is so important because you need it for insulin. So that's one of the hormones that you're going to have moved out of the inside of the capillary to the outside of the capillary so that it can go to the cells that need it. So insulin is an example of some of the hormones, or one of the hormones, that you have to have this transcytosis, the endocytosis followed by the exocytosis, so you can get it across the membrane. And albumin, you're going to have to move it across that way, and some of your fatty acids. Here's a picture I found of a cell doing exocytosis. So here's the cell, right here, there's a cell membrane, and it took whatever it got over here, and it's sending it over here. It merges with the cell membrane and spews it out. So that's kind of a cool picture of exocytosis. It reminds me of that TV show that, or I guess it's a YouTube series, with the Dr. Pimple Popper. It's like, oh my gosh, it's kind of like a pimple popping. Here's another picture that doesn't have anything to do with blood, but this is actually a woman making milk, and these are little bags of milk that she's making, and she brings them over to the cell membrane and releases the milk, and it runs down the duct for the baby to drink. So I thought that was kind of cool. So there's the little bags that do the exocytosis. All right, this is slide 87, and we're talking about edema. And there's three main reasons that you would have fluid to build up in your tissue. One of them is your kidneys aren't working. Another one is you're over making histamine and you're causing swelling. And then old age and poor venous return. So this would be lack of exercise a lot of times. Reduced capillary reabsorption. If you don't have enough protein, hypoproteinemia, not enough protein, or if your liver is damaged, maybe you have hepatitis, or you're a drinker and you're getting cirrhosis of the liver. Those are two of the big liver problems that people have. Or you're not getting enough protein in your diet. You're just eating French fries and drinking Diet Coke or something. So that'll cause you to have fluid leaking out into your tissues and cause edema or swelling. And then, unfortunately, if you've had surgical removal of your lymph nodes. So we haven't talked about lymph nodes. We'll get into that in the next chapter. But, for example, when a woman has breast cancer and they remove the breast, they'll also remove the lymph nodes, a lot of them, under her arm, and now she can't drain her arm. And so you'll end up with a swollen arm. And so they have to have it elevated so that gravity will help it drain. So I've seen some people who've had that problem, but it's a lot better than being dead from breast cancer, for sure. Besides being ugly, to have a swollen area or a swollen ankle or a swollen arm, what are the consequences of it? Well, it can cause the tissue to die because you can't get the waste out of it and they build up in the area. If you happen to have edema around your lungs, it literally can compress your lungs so that they can't open and, contract, open, contract, push the air in, push the air out. And so you actually feel like you're suffocating, which would be terrifying. If you have swelling in your head region, you've got this hard skull and it doesn't give. So you can't swell, like your arms or your ankles swell. You're not going to have that swelling because you've got the skull there. So it can cause headaches at first, and then you'll start vomiting, having seizures, and then you can go into a coma. So having too much fluid around the brain can be extremely dangerous because the skull will keep it from being able to swell to accommodate all the extra fluid. And Sometimes you get so much edema that you don't have enough blood, you don't have enough fluid going through your vessels, and so you can end up with such low blood volume that you can go into circulatory shock. If you watch TV, you're always hearing them say, "Oh, lay them down on the ground. They're going into shock." So what you're talking about there is you're not getting enough blood to the heart for some reason, and the person is not doing very well. So if you lay the person down, then you have gravity helping you. You're not going to have a skeletal muscle pump because the person's in shock and they're laying there, but they're breathing, and so you're still getting the diaphragm moving up and down and up and down, and that's going to help get blood back to the heart and up to the brain. And then the fact that the heart is still beating. So as long as the heart beats, you're always going to get a little suction after it pushes the blood out. And when it relaxes, it makes that little suction to pull through. So this is one of the reasons you lay somebody down if they're going into shock. And here are 3 types of shock that you can go into. So circulatory shock, anytime the heart is not putting out enough blood to meet the body's needs. So that would be circulatory shock. Your whole body is in shock. If your heart itself can't pump, they call that cardiogenic shock. And that's usually because you had a myocardial infarction. You actually had damage to the heart muscle, so it can't pump. So cardiogenic shock, as opposed to circulatory shock, where the blood can't get throughout the body. And then low venous return shock. So too little blood is returning to the heart for whatever reason. Maybe the heart's beating, but you've cut an artery in your leg. So the blood is running out through the artery, or you've had an aneurysm and the blood is pooling out of the hole in wherever your aneurysm was, and so not enough blood is coming back. So low venous return shock. So here's an example of somebody who went into shock. They were standing at attention, they locked their legs, and when you lock your legs, you're not getting the blood flow back to your heart. And so it will pool down in your legs, and eventually you'll not have enough blood going to your brain, and you'll pass out. So here's an example of venous pooling shock, because it's pooling down in your legs and not getting enough to the heart and enough to the brain. You've probably heard someone who found out that a loved one had died, and they pass out. They just faint. Or they're so frightened because someone's breaking into their house that they just faint. So you can have emotional shock that will cause you to pass out or have circulatory shock. And septic shock, this is usually a bacterial toxin. So bacteria, as they divide and divide, they give off a toxic substance, some of them do. And that toxic substance builds up and causes increased capillary permeability. And so you lose the fluid and it causes you to go into shock. Now, there was an incident a while ago. There was a brand of tampons that was so great, because one of the problems you have with tampons is once you fill it up with blood, then it starts leaking. And so then you have to run and change it out. Well, this one was fabulous. It opened up like a flower, and the more you put in it, the more flower-like it got, and the more blood it would hold. And so women, instead of having to change their Tampax every couple of hours, they sometimes would wear them for more than a day. Well, if you do that, bacteria love blood. And so they were getting all these bacterial infections in their feminine hygiene product, in their tampon. And they were going into shock. and it actually killed some because they got so much toxic substance, and they actually call it toxic shock syndrome. So they stopped making that particular brand of tampons, and then they put warnings all in the package. You must change these regularly. Do not wear them more than so many hours because, the bacteria will start growing in them. So toxic shock syndrome was a thing for a while, and unfortunately, several girls died from not changing their tampons often enough. And then you've probably heard of anaphylactic shock. This is somebody who got stung by a bee. This is somebody who ate peanuts that was allergic to it. And this one is such a severe immune reaction to something that's toxic to you, to some antigen. And you release so much histamine so fast, and you have so much vasodilation that you literally go into shock. So if you give somebody a shot of adrenaline, it should reverse this, because this is saying vasodilation, open up all the blood vessels and let all the fluid out. So you're not going to get enough blood back to the heart and to the brain. But give them a shot of epinephrine, which is adrenaline, and it'll cause those blood vessels to constrict, close back up, and you should restore enough blood flow to keep your brain going and your heart going. So anaphylactic shock is one that I think everybody is familiar with that. And the solution for anaphylactic shock is a shot of adrenaline or a shot of epinephrine. And these people will carry an EpiPen. So if they accidentally get some shrimp that they're allergic to or peanuts that they're allergic to. I'm going to wrap this up with one last thing. There are homeostatic mechanisms to bring back spontaneous recovery. So if you have circulatory shock, you'll faint. As soon as you faint, you will fall to a horizontal position, and now gravity is going to give blood back to the brain. So this is one of the reasons you faint when you are not getting enough oxygen to the brain. So a lot of you guys are going to have children, and your children are going to get sassy with you, and they're going to say, I'm going to hold my breath until I die, and then you'll be so sorry. Or if you don't let me have whatever it is I want in Walmart, I'm just going to hold my breath. And what your response is, okay, honey, go ahead. I'll watch. And if they're really good at it and they can actually hold their breath long enough, they'll pass out. As soon as they pass out, blood flow will go back to the brain, and they'll start breathing normally. So my kids didn't try it but once because, hey, I didn't fall for that.